Potion Explosion is one of my favorite titles to use as an introduction to new players of the modern world of board games. One of the things I love about it is the many ways you can modify the game to make it more accessible to all sorts of different skill levels. So, let's get brewing and learn how to teach Potion Explosion. Just like every episode of How to Teach, there is a free downloadable summary of the entire video that you can print out and leave in the box, or save it to your phone so you're ready the next time you find yourself teaching some Potion Explosion wherever you are. I'll give you a reminder at the end of the video to go check it out, so for now, just enjoy the video knowing someone already took notes for you. Now, all that would be useless if you never found yourself playing the game ever again, so let's learn how to sell your friends on playing this game to get it off the shelf and onto the table. One of the hardest parts of any game is getting people interested in playing it with you. One of the parts of this game that had me the most excited to try it out is its DNA that it shares with classic PopCap game Bejeweled, or I guess Candy Crush if you were born in this millennia. The rush you get when a combo you cleverly set up keeps on going and going is absolutely one of the core draws of this game. It's also got a lot of emergent strategy in the potion metagame, and that's not even mentioning that the marbles themselves are super satisfying. Honestly, the marbles alone can get people interested in this game. You'd be shocked at how universal the appeal of marbles is. It's also got table presence galore with its gorgeous and vibrant potion tiles, and not to mention, again, the giant rows of marbles that you'll constantly be playing with as the game goes on. Want a little spiel to give to your friends to get them hooked? Here's a 30-second pitch you can use to sell anyone on giving this game a shot. It's finals time here at Wizard School, and we are competing to brew the best gosh dang potions that Professor Humblescore has ever seen. In this game, we will be drafting ingredients represented by different colored marbles that are all pouring out of this dispenser. The cool part comes with the explosion mechanic. On your turn, when you take a marble from the column, the rest of the marbles flow down to the space, and if two marbles of the same color then collide, they explode and you get to take all of the colored marbles that touched as well, which just might lead to another explosion. Draft the ingredients and brew potions to score tons of delicious points. Even cooler, after you make a potion, you can later drink it and use its effects to help you further your quest to brew the best potions and become the star student. When setting up for new players, I recommend only getting out the empty marble dispenser, which I'll demonstrate why here in a bit. You'll also grab the player boards and the starting potions, which all have a little star on them that is incredibly hard to see. You're going to want to get the rest of the potions all shuffled and ready to go in their 5 separate stacks like you normally would, but leave them in the box for now. There should be enough space for the potion stacks in the box once the marble divider is out. Leave the rest of the tokens in the box as well, we'll grab those later too. As for the marbles themselves, they're actually going to be the very first thing you get out when starting your teach. As someone with admittedly very well hidden but shockingly severe social anxiety, the part of teaching any group a new game that easily builds the most dread, at least for me, is always found right at the beginning. Getting everyone's attention when you're looking to start your teach. People are talking, snacking on their phone, it can feel like they are primed to ignore you, but just remember, they're here to play a game and you're there to teach them. All you gotta do is grab their attention. This game has a great solution to that built right in. Dumping the marbles onto the divider as loudly as possible. The noise combined with the marbles are a phenomenal way to get everyone's attention immediately. This will get yourself over that initial hurdle and get your teach started off on the right foot. So keep an eye out for when people are ready to start before pouring those out, since yeah, you can really only do that party trick once. At least you can only do it once without looking super weird. After you pour the marbles into the dispenser, feel free to let people take and mess with the marbles as you begin your teach. It's easily the most tactile part of this game by far and will really draw their attention to the table as you start to explain what the heck we're even doing. Now, before we move on to the teach itself, we need to talk about the potions you'll want to use. For those of you who haven't read the rules yet, which you should probably do at some point, but in this game your primary objectives, the potions that you're brewing, also have activatable effects that let you manipulate the marbles in different ways. On the back of the rulebook, there are actually a breakdown of all the descriptions and what they do, and the game recommends that you use these top 6 for your first game. For most groups, the recommended setup using the top 6 is fine, and you can just skip this part of the video. However, when it comes to newer players or groups with differing skill levels, I actually slightly disagree with this loadout, and here's why. Sands of Time. Sands of Time lets you reuse another potions effect that you've already used, which can be very, very powerful. The level of control you get from this makes it one of the most versatile and powerful potion effects, since if you're smart and have all the other potion effects already used, this becomes a 5-in-1 potion. As such, if you've got players of differing skill levels, experienced gamers might pick up on this tactic right at the start of the game and use it to drastically increase their odds of winning by utilizing its flexibility. Then what might happen is you'll have your newer players watch the more experienced players in confusion as to how they're brewing so many freaking potions on every single one of their turns, like they're performing some form of witchcraft, which, I mean, I guess it technically is because, like, potions, but that's also not to mention that it's easily one of the most complicated in terms of strategy and explanation when compared to the other potion effects. Granted, this game is pretty light to begin with, so it's not likely to overload even the greenest of gamers, but even so, it's just one notch more complex than the rest of the potions, so it'll be an outlier in your teach regardless. I prefer to avoid Sands of Time when getting set up for groups of mixed skill levels, which more often than not is basically every group. So, to smooth things over, I recommend ditching Sands of Time and swapping in the Balm of Uttermost Stickiness. Since its effect is literally just ready, get ready for it, grab touching marbles of the same color. Boom, done. Easy teachy marble squeezy. Now, you might want to make one more modification to the potion array, specifically when you have players at the table who handle take that poorly. If you're like me and you have that one friend that's way too salty for their own good, I recommend ditching the Elixir of Blind Love, which lets you steal an opponent's stored marbles. Instead of that, you can just use the filter of Lavamancing, which removes 5 marbles of one color from one track of the dispenser. Even though losing 3 marbles from the Elixir of Blind Love is such a minor thing, I promise you that the experience of losing their precious supply of marbles from a very targeted attack they had no opportunity to oppose will really tick a particular type of player off. If they lose, they will blame it entirely on having their marbles stolen that one time, and it's just going to be a vibe killer. I'll be the first to admit it's a super minor thing, but you never know what'll be the difference between someone wanting to play the game once and playing it more than once. Nailed it. Alright, once you've shuffled those potions, pour out those marbles like we talked about, and we'll dive into the teach by setting the big 3. Set the stage, set the goal, and set the expectations. Some games benefit from spreading these out across the entire experience, but Potion Explosion works well with getting all 3 set up right from the very start. To set the stage, you can mention the story of the game as presented in the rulebook, or that little intro I gave at the beginning of the video is perfect. In addition to that, you can take a moment to talk about the different colored marbles and what in-universe ingredients they represent as shown on the inside cover of the rulebook, and also on the outside of the inside of the box. There's also great one-liners in the rulebook you can use to spice up your introduction of the game. And as always, music is critical to a memorable board game experience. I recommend some classic but frantic adventure fantasy music like you've been hearing to really get everyone in the mood. The Witcher games have really good soundtracks that fit the bill pretty well, I'd say. It's a shame that there's no good wizard school movies out there that have memorable soundtracks that you could use. Oh well. As for setting the goal of the game, we are obviously going to talk about how you brew potions to earn points, and how whoever has the most points wins, but we're going to omit some of the set collection mechanics for now, despite them being kind of one of the main ways the game progresses. This is because it's not relevant at the very start of the game. Remember, the fewer things that you can explain at the start of a game, the faster you can get people playing the game. However, we do still need to mention how the game ends, which in this game is the round when the last skill token is taken, and everyone has taken the same number of turns. But the skill tokens tie into those set collection mechanics we're looking to skip until later, so here's an example spiel of how I'd go about setting the goal of this game. So we're going to take turns taking ingredients from this dispenser and putting them into our potions. Once we've finished a potion, it flips over and we are one step closer to victory, earning victory points equal to the number on the top here. Depending on what potions you brew, we'll get these skill tokens, which more on these in a second, and once these run out, everyone gets the same number of turns and then the game ends. We'll tally up all our delicious points, and whoever has the most will be valedictorian from the graduating class at the Horribleorum Sorcery Academy for Witty Witches and Wizards. That is the actual name of the school. While everyone is mesmerized by the pretty colors, you can explain that when marbles collide when you take the single marble for your turn, the marbles explode and you get to take those too. Do your best to show a double explosion for your example as well. The most important part of setting expectations is to illustrate how players will be getting oodles and oodles of marbles like they're the hungriest of hippos before moving on. I feel like starting with this really emphasizes the core engagement of the game and gets players excited to start taking turns, brewing some potions, and really sets their expectations for having fun. Once you finish explaining, or heck, even while you're explaining the explosion mechanic, that's a great time to bring up what you're going to be using those marbles for. Once you've set up your big 3, point out the starting potions that you set off to the side at the start of the game and place them brewed side up. This not only lets you show off the colorful, pretty potions, but it makes it really clear that there are indeed different types of potions, since once you turn them all over, they all basically look the same. That's because the main differentiating feature on that side of the potions are the cork and effect icons, and they're really easy to miss at a glance, so be sure to point those out as you're moving through this next part. Once you've shown all the different potions, I'll flip some of them over to show the 4 different colored ingredient slots and physically demonstrate taking marbles, following all the explosion rules, and putting them into their spots on the potions. You'll then show how once a potion is full of marbles, you will then flip it over to show that you successfully brewed it, and you'll earn points at the end of the game equal to whatever numbers appear on it. If your players are the type that care about like winning or strategy or whatever, you can also mention how higher point potions tend to require more marbles with a greater variety of colors. Normal risk versus reward stuff. At this point, you can also mention that each potion has a one-time use effect that you can use later in the game, and that they're all good, and you'll explain what each one does here in a moment once someone's actually made one in the game. Little teaching tip for you that applies to any board game. If there's a mechanic that has a ton of different rules and you don't necessarily need to know them all ahead of time, like card effects or player powers or the different potions and potion explosion, you can avoid having to explain them all if you start by just saying they're all strategically equivalent. Players tend to care less about the differences between components like that if they're told they're balanced. What that means for your teach is that they won't then interrupt to ask what makes each one different in the moment, and avoids derailing your teach to go into a rules-heavy breakdown of a mechanic that they won't even use for another 10 minutes. Once you've mentioned the potion effects and how none of them suck, go ahead and shuffle and distribute 2 different starting potions to each player. The rulebook says to do a snake draft of the starting potions, but frankly, it's just a waste of time. It isn't actually fun or meaningful to a new player until their second game once they know what all the potion effects do, so just randomly deal them out. While everyone's getting their potions situated on their player boards, you can go ahead and pull out the 5 stacks of potions that you set in the box and put those into the middle of the table. The reason why I say to leave these in the box is that people's eyes will glaze over as they see giant stacks of colors and numbers and holes. Once you know what the potions are and how they work, this massive stack of potions is a much easier sight to take in. Remember, you gotta look at the game from a perspective of someone who knows nothing about it, and 5 stacks of like 30 different potions when you don't know what they do or what they are can feel like a bigger deal to them than it actually is. Once everyone's got their potions ingredient side up in front of them, you, dear teacher, can go ahead and go first and get the gameplay started. You'll go ahead and walk everyone through your turn and possibly the other players' first turns as sort of a practice round, if you will. You'll want to make sure to mention that on their turn, they get to take a single marble, and that when they do that, they are trying to trigger explosions like you talked about earlier, and how explosions can trigger more explosions, and also mention that this game is very terrible to play in an airport for a variety of reasons. So, there are a few things from this point you'll want to keep an eye out for and explain when they come up as the turns go by. But just to be honest, most of these will most likely happen on the first or second turns of the game. The first time a player has extra marbles that they can't place, or if someone points out their retort flask on their player board before then, you can explain how you can simply keep 3 extra marbles between turns. Easy teachy marble keepy. I already made that joke, but I wanted to make it again because it brings me joy. The first time someone puts marbles back into the dispenser, make sure to keep an eye out that they're doing so at random and not trying to game the system by putting all of one color of marble into the same track. Most of the time people will just naturally chuck them on the dispenser at random, but I know that in life, sometimes people can do truly unforgivable things, like not distributing their marbles correctly. The first time someone finishes a potion, you can walk them through how to get their new potions after the end of their turn. I say after the end of their turn, in all caps like that, because you can't put new marbles from your flask into any new potions that you just drafted until your next turn. This is important for that stupid Elixir of Blind Love potion that totally ruins your game plan and makes you lose. And once everyone has had their first turn, as early as the start of your second turn, you can explain basically the rest of the game as everyone's got the fundamentals down by this point. Once someone's brewed a potion, which should happen around turn 2, if not sooner, because it's not hard to brew at least 1 potion every turn, that's a good time to explain in more detail how you can drink the potions that you brewed on your turn to help you gain more ingredients, and that you can do so at any point on your turn before or after you take your single marble. Each of the potions has a quick explanation that you can just go through by pointing those out using the ones on each player's board as your first examples, and if you don't see a particular potion, you can just use the ones in the back of the rulebook. Also, if you haven't already, go ahead and point out the different scoring values on each potion. Also, feel free to emphasize that they still score points even if you drink them, because the exam isn't just about brewing the best potions, but also showing that you know when best to use them. Now, the most important thing to mention when it comes to potions, all slow and deliberate while maintaining eye contact, is that potion effects do not cause explosions, and that only your single marble that you take for your turn will trigger those. People will say that you didn't mention that when they use a potion effect, so you gotta do it real deliberate so that they can't pull that nonsense on you. I'm clearly biased. Now, people who've played Potion Explosion before might have noticed that we haven't brought out some things. We'll start with the little help tokens. These little help tokens are a mechanic where you can take a point penalty to grab one extra marble on your turn. I personally think that those kinds of mechanics are especially confusing for players who are new to modern board games. I've had family members get pretty confused when I bring up that you lose points for choosing to do a thing, and they'll say stuff like, I don't get why I'd ever want to do that seems like a waste. It results in a bit of an explanation about how a point economy works and how you can spend a few points now to gain more points back later. Much like talking about it right now in this video, it kind of grinds the whole process to a halt just to talk about something that no one will actually use. For someone's first game of Potion Explosion, the only instance where I would bring out the little help tokens is if they audibly say, man, if I only had the ability to take just one marble right now. And if no one says that, you can just leave them in the box, at least for the very first game. The potion effects will fill the void left behind by the little help tokens, and are not only more fun and interesting to use, they're also free. If no one's asked about it before now, you can also finally start bringing up how to get these skill tokens. You'll re-explain that these are essentially the game's timer, and how when they're completely out and everyone's taken the same number of turns, then the game ends. That means that if you, dear teacher, went first like we talked about, you can completely ignore the first player token and leave that in the box. It's one less thing on the table, and with some players, every tiny distraction removed is 100% worth it. Once they know when the game will end, you can go on to explain how the set collection mechanics work, that getting 3 of the same kind of a potion or 5 different potions will get you 1 skill token, which are worth bonus points at the end of the game. As the game goes on, it does the table good to give gentle reminders to players to use the potions that they brewed on their turn, because there's no reason not to use them. They'll have more fun if they drink, just like real life. You can also help point out that someone who's got 2 of a particular potion to grab a 1/3 of that kind of potion when drafting, as that's something that's pretty easy to miss. Finally, it's time for scoring. This game is a pretty easy one to walk through the scoring process on. Just have everyone add up all their skill tokens and their potions to get the winner. Phone calculators are always encouraged, and for maximum comedy chops, have pomp and circumstance ready to go and roll the rulebook up like a diploma to hand to the winner. And with that, I think you're ready to teach some Potion Explosion. It's a simple one, but as you can see, there are tons of ways to tweak the experience and stretch out the rules across the entire game to get people playing as fast as possible. This is one of my favorite gateway games, and I hope you enjoy teaching your friends and family how to play. As always, if you want a step-by-step summary of all the information in this video, there is a link to a downloadable teacher's guide that you can print out and keep in the box, or save it to your phone. Either way, you'll be ready to go the next time you play Potion Explosion. The teacher's guide is located on my Patreon and is available for free to everyone, even if you're not a patron. I don't think you even need an account. There's also fun behind-the-scenes stuff like outtakes and extra content that you can get just by chucking a few bucks a month at me, if you want. If you like this guide and used it to learn how to teach the game or just have questions or suggestions, please leave a comment. I would love to hear from you. Now, go forth and explode some potion! Wait! The potions don't explode, the ingredients explode. Am I the first person? I can't be the first person to notice this. Please tell me I'm not the first person to notice this. They should have called this game Ingredient Explosion. I mean, like, I know that's not as catchy, but it's more accurate. Super weird. Those went freaking everywhere. Alright, let's collect. This is what I get for trying to do something without looking. Oh, God. I'm never going to find all of these, am I? Oh, there's some all the way over here. Come on. I think this is all of them. I'm going to have to watch the footage back later and then be like, oh, there was a yellow one that went all the way under the shelf. Cool. Hot tip, use your hands. Don't try to pour it from like a dice tray. It doesn't go well.